Welcome to the Grief Pod with Venetia Quick. This is a weekly podcast which looks at every aspect of something which has or will at some point affect us all. And that is grief. Whether you've lost a loved one or about to lose someone you know, or perhaps you're simply trying to help someone navigate their grief and don't know where to start or what to say, then perhaps this is the podcast for you. Each week I'll be bringing you different stories and experiences of loss, love, hope and at times humour. Journalist and author of the brilliant book Esther is now following you. Tanya Sweeney recently wrote in the Irish Independent about her mum Gabrielle, who she lost 15 years ago, and how being a parent yourself, Tanya, has sort of brought back this huge surge of grief as your daughter gets older. And I want to talk to you about a book in a few minutes, because that is a story of grief as well, and the sort of complex way that people sort of react or respond to their grief. But can we, I suppose, start by talking about Gabrielle, who is your mum?
Yeah, is and was and is still my mum, obviously. So my mum died in 2011, in October 2011. She was 62 and she'd really struggled. She'd gotten a diagnosis of bone and spine cancer, which is an incredibly painful cancer. I mean, they're all lethal, obviously, you know, but they're all horrible. But this one was really, really, I mean, her spinal column sort of cracked immediately. And from there, it was just, you know, really challenging for her.
Probably started like something like a sore back or...
Well, funnily enough, she'd been in a car accident. I'm laughing, you know, but she'd been in a car accident in Cavan. A lorry jackknifed and slammed into her and my brothers, you know, and she had this back pain and she just put it down to the accident and never got it investigated. And about a month before her all clear from cervical cancer, her 5-year all clear from cervical cancer, she went in for the scans and that's what happened, basically, you know.
So there was no particular symptom?
Just the backache. She was absolutely fine, you know. Yeah. And actually, after she'd you know, come away from the cervical cancer, you know, with the all clear, I think it gave her such a new lease of life. She was going everywhere. She was going to loads of gigs. You loved going to like Leonard Cohen or Bruce Springsteen, you know. And she hadn't really.
So she was as cool as her name.
She was cool. She was really cool.
Because for that time in Ireland, we were just talking about this before we started recording, for that time in Ireland, Gabrielle wasn't a very common name, and it's sort of this very sort of, you know, exotic and cool and cosmopolitan. It's not. And
I didn't ask her. I must actually ask some of her siblings where it came from, because they all have very traditional Irish names in her family, you know. But I think there must have been a neighbour or something. She grew up in a very Protestant strong arm of Donegal, and it was, you know, the names were fantastic up there, you know. Am I allowed to say a name? There was a guy, I mean, she used to talk about all her neighbours, and there was a guy called Aubrey Bustard, and I was like, I am 100% using that name as a character.
It's such a brilliant name.
It's a work of poetry.
Yeah,
like, you know?
Yeah.
So Gabrielle was, but of course, up in Donegal, they couldn't really pronounce Gabriel, so she had to be gay, you know. Yeah. So she was gay to everyone who knew her. But yeah, no, I mean, for the 5 years in between her, you know, getting the remission from cervical cancer and the diagnosis of bone and spine cancer, she went absolutely wild. You know, we went on holidays. She went to loads of gigs. She just really took life with both hands, which in a way she really hadn't for. Now listen, Venetia, don't get me wrong. She was an Irish mammy through and through. You know, the elder immersion, etc. All the cliches rang true. You know, but she really did. I think the first diagnosis rattled her a little bit. You know, and she was like, you know what, you know,
she must have been quite young then when she got that.
54, maybe 53 when she was first diagnosed with cancer, and I think I would have been like in my mid to late 20s when that happened. And you know, I think about this now so much. Like, I was in the middle of a very 20-something life, and I remember being very angry that, and actually, as she became terminally ill, I think this is something that happens, and maybe we don't talk about it too much. You're sort of angry that you're being pulled into this caretaker role. I mean, in a way, it's a privilege to take care of somebody. But I remember, like, you know, I wasn't able to go to the electric picnic one year. I wasn't able to, you know, I was in my late 20s, early 30s. I'm not sure I really grabbed the gravitas of what was going on.
And also still at that age, a lot of us still feel we're invincible.
100%. And your parents are too, in their late 50s. Yeah. So I think I was a bit like, well, this is an awful inconvenience to me. And it's only as I realised, the treatment wasn't working and we were really looking at a terminal situation, and I began to sort of really get with the programme. But I do remember at the start, being very like,
nonchalant.
I can't believe I'm having to go to an A&E again. What's this about?
How did she then take the news? What was her...
Wow.
Did that sort of...
I don't know. She was very sanguine, but she had been a nurse, you see, so she'd seen a lot of death.
So she knew as well what
she
was
full
happening.
Well knew, and she had a couple of siblings who'd gone before her, so I think she understood. I mean, she put to her credit, she put a really brave face on it, and every so often the facade would crack. And, she'd cry. I remember one of the last, actually it was maybe the last night before... a nurse said to her, you do need to go into the hospice now. I mean, enough is enough. I mean, you're not really able to manage this on your own, And she'd had really crazy chest infections and lots of complications. And I think when she was told, hospice, it is such a final hurdle. It's the final kind of lap. And I mean, listen, I've done reports in hospices. I know that not everyone who goes into a hospice is necessarily, some of them do come out. Some of it's for respite, some of it's for, a breather and pain management. But I think we understood that this would be it, when that happened. So there was a couple of... I remember saying to her once or twice, I was like, are you scared? And she went, yeah. And I think I must have had a bit of alarm on my face. And she went, no, I'm not, I mean, there was a lot of pain. I think the thing I remember from that whole journey was just how much pain she had to deal with. She was spiritual in her own way, so I don't think she was too...
religious.
I don't know. She wasn't necessarily religious, but she definitely believed that something else was going to be going on for her. It wasn't going to be lights out, But yeah, it was. I think there was a little bit of anger there,
and the fear as well, because there's all, when you talk about hospice and you talk about palliative care, and again, palliative care can mean support.
Sure.
And it doesn't necessarily mean you're gone straight away.
100%.
It could be support. And I think that is a message often that needs to get out more. The palliative care is there to support families and the person and day to day.
Completely.
But I wonder for somebody, and for your mum, when the word hospice is mentioned and they're walking in or being helped into the hospice, what is going on in somebody's head at that point?
I do need to tell you about how my mother walked into the hospice. My mother walked into the hospice like she was the Kigara. I mean, she walked in her heels and the jewellery flapping and the hair done. And I mean, if you didn't know her, you think she was in to, take names. That kind of way. She literally walked. I mean, I remember the sound of her heels. Flap, flap, flap. And she got into, maybe I won't mention the hospice, but we got into the room and she was in a public room, 6-bed ward. And she looked at the bed and she saw the other kind of people in the thing. And she went, nah, not doing it. And she went back up to the desk in her full Karen voice and went, let me speak to who's in charge here. I'm not staying if I don't get a private room. And of course, I'm beside her, creased with embarrassment, going, Mom, stop. You can't do that here, And sure enough, she got her room, you know. And in a way, what a mercy.
But also,
my God.
Why not?
Well, I mean, I think she was like, all bets are off. I'm just going to carry on to my liking right now, which she did. And it was a very fun, in a way, few weeks, that we had in the hospice. We kind of like nothing was really left unsaid in many ways, and we just had a bit of fun, I think, I mean, it was horrific, obviously, and we knew what was coming, but there was a lot of peace. I remember, making jigsaws and, there was a few drinks had and, there was a lot of care going on. I mean, at the same time, it was, it wasn't exactly, I should really work on how I'm going to say this. It wasn't euphoric. I mean, it was not I wasn't skipping into the hospice every day. You know, I was going over there with an absolute sense of acute dread. But when we got in there, you know, we were tender with each other. And I think Mum and I, we had quite a fractious relationship. We were very alike, you know, and I was young, you know, and a pig, the way you are in your 20s. So we used to kind of squabble a lot, you know, and I think we just really had to put that aside and really just kind of lean into that caring side of me. It's very deeply buried, Venetia, the caring part of me, let me tell you. I had to dig deep.
Well, I think as well, like when you go into the hospice, the people that work there are just, so it's just, they're a different breed, if that's the way to say it, because they make things so unbelievably comfortable for not only the person that's staying there, but the people visiting. And because it's sort of, you don't know every day when you walk in whether it's going to be your last time going in either.
Yeah, it's a very special place. I mean, I did a piece for the Irish Independent about 3 years ago, I think, when I went to the Harold's Cross Hospice to report on what it was like to work there, to be in there as a patient, to be in there as a loved one. I wanted to kind of do a deep tissue investigation. And there was something so incredibly humbling. I mean, I sat in a few of the meetings and listened to the multidisciplinary team talk about every single patient, and to hear the way they talk about the holistic care of everybody and their loved ones. I was like, who knew there was this much elbow grease going on behind the scenes? It was amazing. For me, I remember as a person with a parent in, you know, who's a patient in the hospice, it's a very, very special place. You understand on some level that life is going on, but it's just life on a whole heightened level. Everyone is very, very mindful about living and life. You know, it's really the biggest conversation and preoccupation in there, living and getting the most. No one's in there complaining about the parking tickets or you know, the whatever else is going on in the outside world or the road rage. Everyone is just their shoulders to the wheel, you know, and they're really just it's all about equality and a love and a care, you know, and
a comfort.
A comfort, 100%. And it's an incredible vibe. And like you say, the people who work there are there to facilitate that. I mean, it's not to say they're under pressure. It's a lot of work, you know, keeping the facade going of peace. But the other thing that made me laugh about hospices is, like, you go in there and you don't necessarily access this, you know, plane of enlightenment. I mean, you're still you, you know, even though you're dying. And I remember my mum, like, you know, she was a bit of a queen bee, you know, she liked to be the sort of, you know, the alpha female anywhere she went. So sure enough, you know, on the way out, there was a bit of, you know, she met a couple of big personalities in there, you know. Yeah. And I do remember them all being, I remember one conversation, well, I was told I have 3 weeks. Oh, yeah. Well, I was told of 2. And there was this sort of, you know... One-upmanship, which was just... God, it was funny, you know. And I mean, there was a couple of people then she didn't really take to, and she just couldn't be nice to them, you know. And I was like, God, she'll just... You do you. Okay? Yeah, because, you know, it and it was very funny just seeing her just try and be sort of, you know, the queen bee, you know, in the little dressing gown and the little fluffy slippers, and the morphine going a mile a minute. You could hear that morphine patch, or not patch, the driver going like the clappers, you know, and but I just remember thinking, the people are still human, you know, and we think that there's this sort of peace thing going on, and there's not, you know, they're still them, you know, with their lives. Their lives are almost, you know, outside the door, but they still have a life, you know. And of course, then becomes going in every day or in every other day or whatever it may be for you or the family member. It becomes your way of life because you factor it into your day. It becomes a thing. Yeah, and it was a 3-hour round trip on public. I didn't drive at the time. I mean, my advice to anyone is just get your driver's license as soon as possible, because you never know when you have to schlep to a hospice. But I was going 3 hours there and back, and that took a huge... And I was a freelance journalist at the time, so that's just the travelling, you know. Never mind being in the hospice and being with your loved one, you know, and being present. And not thinking, I have to call this person. This person hasn't called me back. Oh, absolutely, I need to, I mean, like most people just do not have those hours, you have to make the time and you just have to prioritize. But I do remember feeling very fretful that like work had to take a bit of a slide, and my social life had obviously just gone down the toilet entirely. But it's a privilege to do it, and you're happy to do it, and it becomes a way of life, and you walk in the door and it becomes like a second home, or like walking into your mum's house. It's a really weird liminal, is that the word, time. You're just sort of in a hinterland of like waiting,
and it can be exhausting as well, and draining, and the emotion. And then that all goes, because when you lose the person dies, then suddenly that part of your everyday life is gone.
It's so funny because
weird, because you don't want to be doing it, but you do, but you don't, and you're so used to it, especially if it's.
You feel very unmoored, don't you? And like you say, you've gotten into a routine, and there's something of a comfort in that routine. And then when you don't have that routine, I mean, I remember the night my mother died. My mother died at 8:15 on a Tuesday in the evening, and we did the undertakers and all the rest of it. And I remember my brothers and my father going, "Will we go back to her house?" And I was like, the last thing I want to do is go there. I'm going back to my place. And a friend of mine, Shilpa, contacted me going, "Will I bring over some wine?" And I was like, damn right you will. And crepes.
Bring the off license.
Oh, I was like, bring the lot, you know. And I opened the door to Shilpa, and Shilpa was almost crying. And I was like, hiya, how's it going? Great, okay. And I started to kind of put this I mean, I was in pure shock, I think, put this spin on it. I was like, do you know what? I'll be able to go on holiday now. This is great. No, I'm actually fine. Shilpa, don't be worrying about me. Look, I don't have to do all these pajamas. And there was a load of pajamas on a clothes horse. I am freed from the tyranny of the pajama washing. This is wonderful, And she was like, looking at me with this face as if to go, oh God, she's really wandered off the, plantation here, like, And it was a very weird old business, and I just wasn't letting it in. I was a bit like, right, that's that done.
Because it is, I think that's actually the shock and the trauma.
Massive shock.
Because if somebody, and your mum had been sick before, and the sort of, and my dad was quite like that as well. Right. The Lazarus sort of mentality, where it's like, and I've spoken about this before, he went aged 81 into hospital, got COVID in hospital.
Right.
Came out again. This sort of stuff, and then very quick at the end. But I think when you have somebody who's been ill on and off, and they always come back, you always go, oh, look, you've grieved them almost before. And then you're sort of, there's this thing that they'll always come out, they'll always be fine, because they always have before.
Yeah. Totally.
One thing you've written about is, and a lot of people don't talk about this, but it struck me when I was reading it, is the last moments when you get the call to go in, and it's the come now. And like you have the warning of the come now is imminent. Yeah. If somebody is ill, particularly with cancer. Mm-hmm. Those last few hours are obviously horrendous. But the things I don't think people talk about enough, in that in order to know what to expect, like the noise of the breathing, the sound of the rattle, like it's
I'm laughing in a way, but
but it stays horrendous with you.
Oh, it does it ever. I mean, I mean, like you say, I got that call, got a taxi over because I was so worried about not being there. And I was in the middle of writing a column for a newspaper, and I mean, talk about the best excuse to not finish a column. I was like, I can't do this right now. And here's why. And I got over there, and like, I mean, again, like I say, I was all business. I'm the firstborn daughter. That's a whole other conversation. And I was all the sort of port of contact. My parents had been divorced, so I was sort of, we'll say the person, maybe the next of kin or whatever. And,
the go-to person.
The go-to, kind of, I mean, my mum had fantastic friends, who provided some incredible support, but I think those kind of phone calls. And so my brother called me and said, we've been told we have to come in, And I got there, and they were so gentle, the nurses, and they went, now listen, Gay is coming to the end of her journey. And the way they just said that, I let it all kind of go out, and I kind of pulled it back in, you know, kind of for 1 second I let it go, and then I was like, no, you have to be the you know, the person in charge. And I remember going in, I'll regret this forever, but they were playing Leonard Cohen, and you know, my mum was lying in the bed, breathing, unconscious by now, breathing steadily, that sort of weirdly metronomic, rhythmic, intense breathing, you know, and I'm like,
and it's loud.
It's loud, and it doesn't hurt them. It's not a, you know, it's, but you're like, God, this is really tough, you know. But I said to my brother, I was like, turn that off anyway now. We're not doing Leonard Cohen here, you know. And I mean, God love him, he you know, just turned the thing off. And I really do wish that I'd not done that on my mum. Do you know, that kind of way, that I'd let her listen to the music. But of course I was like, well, I can't listen to Leonard Cohen right now. It's too much for me. You know, I'm an awful brat, in fairness now, when I think of it like that.
You didn't want to ruin it for yourself.
I did. Well, like, you know, main character syndrome. But I remember just being like, it's too intense, and let's turn that off, and let's just, and again, it's like you get into the zone. And I remember this guy knocked on the door, like a rubbernecker. And he knocked on the door, knowing full well that there was a person dying in the room. They have a notice on the board, on the door going, you know, report to the nurse's station. You know, don't knock on the door looking for directions to the bog or whatever, which this guy did. And I stood up, and he was trying to look in, going, is there? I'm looking for something or other. And I went, it's not here. You know, and also, what are you doing? You know, so close the door. There was all these funny little things like that happened, and you know, people kept coming in, people that knew my mum, and a friend of hers rang in the middle of it all, and I was like, she can't come to the phone right now, funnily enough, and it was all just very heavy, serious. I don't know if we did much laughing at the time. You know, you hear these. I remember, you know, watching a documentary. I think it was the Virgin Media documentary on the hospice. And, you know, there was a family who were playing music and just really turning it into a beautiful, sacred space. I just didn't have the presence of mind to do anything like that. I was just kind of sitting there waiting for something to happen, you know. Because
if you haven't been through it before, you don't know what's going to happen.
Absolutely. And the shock, it's such a quiet shock. And you're just like, I can't believe I'm here. And like I say, I didn't have the presence of mind to call some of my mother's friends. Again, another regret. And, you know, anytime I walked out of the room, I was like, I can't believe the rest of the world is going on as normal. This is so odd. I went across to a shop just to get a sandwich or something, and people were there queuing, and I was like, are you mad? How are you doing this?
How are you eating?
How are you queuing for an RTE guide? What's that about? Like, mad. And just, and then, like you say, at the very end, you know, there's the breathing where, you know, there's a breath in and then there's no breath for a long time, and you're like, well, that's it. And then there's another one and another. And you're just in a state of complete and utter panic. And my brothers were actually watching football down the corridor, so they weren't there. But an aunt of mine ran to get them, so they came in, you know, for my mother's last breath. And it was really weird because what she did was, she almost kind of did this kind of scrunch of her face as if she'd forgotten to turn off the immersion. She was like, you know, and then it just kind of went. And I just remember being so, oh my God, in the moment, I was so proud of her. Oh, I went, well done. That was incredible. You know, I was so proud. That was the big feeling of just, you played a blinder there.
Isn't that weird? Because it's sort of what, you know, a partner might think when you give birth.
Right,
you know, isn't it? So the life and death.
There was a massive sense of a birthing. Yeah, that's exactly the analogy. That's amazing, actually. Yeah, I just remember being like, well done. That was such an achievement for you, you know. And I just,
you got there.
It's done. It's over. And I hate that battle chat, but I was like, you know what? You've won in a weird way. I can't describe it. I was like, you did it on your terms in a way, and you just sort of slipped out, you know, gracefully with, because I mean, I've heard of deaths that have been
horrendous,
really different, you know, and she just did it so quietly. And like I say, I just went, well done, Mum, well done. And everyone around me was crying, and of course me being, you know, hard ass McGinty over here, just being like, you know,
But then that comes out later.
Of course it does.
And then in one way that's even harder, because it can come out a year later, and by that point people are starting to go about their business and not forget, but you know, it's sort of not as immediate as it was.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure, as you know, the second year is the danger year, right?
Yeah.
Because, like you say, every time someone meets you in the first year, how are you?
Yeah. What can I do?
Exactly. Here's a casserole.
Here's a cake.
Totally. Yeah. And then year 2, there's an assumption that, well, we're not bringing it up now because we've kind of played that record. And you're, meanwhile, the heaviness of what's just happened is really landing on you.
Well, the blur is finished. I always see the first year as this sort of foggy blur where you're just keeping the show on the road.
Yeah.
And
you're adrenalised in a way.
Yeah, you are. It's sort of like, and you're okay because, you're not really going there and there's people around you who are carrying you through. Yeah. But I think the second year is because you don't have this time last year, or you don't have, you're moving into
your firsts are gone.
The firsts are gone, and the last photo is even longer, and you're older, and if you've kids, they're older, and everything's sort of
completely. You move into different years that they weren't alive in. And
or
you're
things. I remember once walking to work, and there were houses being built on my walk to work, and I know shock houses being built, but there were. And I remember it was really weird walking back one day and they were finished and going, Martin will never see this finished. And it was ridiculous because it was like there were houses he wouldn't even have walked by. Yeah. Do you know that way? It's just these little things. And I think that's what in the second and third years people need to be aware of, that perhaps isn't.
The second year is an absolute beast altogether. And I actually fell into a massive depression. Now, I mean, again, there's a conversation to be had about grief, depression, mental health. But I remember it just got to the point where I couldn't get out of bed. There was a little bit of suicide ideation, and I was a bit like, I'm really afraid for myself now, and I don't know if this is grief or if I'm just experiencing a common or garden depression. But I remember going to the doctor who medicated me for, right enough. But it was a huge slump, and again, like that, I think I'd had all these things in place and I was like, I think I'm fine. I've actually come through this grief thing like a pro. I am brilliant at this. I'm really strong. And it was and I think, to get to year 2 and understand that you haven't even gotten off the blocks yet. Wow, that was a major shock. I haven't even gone on the journey. I went over here and went somewhere else. There wasn't a journey to speak of. I moved to Australia 6 weeks after my mum died, for the crack.
But that's
the way
escapism.
You know, like
pure escape. It's like every sort of, and a friend of mine who lost her husband as well did the same thing, like every sort of kid's midterm break, Easter holidays, Christmas, whatever. It's like, where can we go? You're on to love holidays. Where can we go? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because
you're in a way you're free and you're like, well, I'm going to go now. So off I popped to Australia, had a ball.
Anything
obviously.
Not to deal.
Exactly. And I went over there and had a great time. And the Christmas was tricky. Actually, New Year's Eve was a really hard one. Leaving behind that year was really difficult. But like the grief, as you know, Venetia, like the moments come. I remember watching maybe 2 or 3 years ago. I was, during COVID, BBC4 have these fantastic music documentaries on, and I watched. My mother adored Neil Diamond. I thought Neil Diamond was her boyfriend at one point because he was so in our lives. As a kid, he was always on in the car. She just talked about him as if he was like, her lover down the road kind of thing, And
he was.
Well, I mean, if only God. But yeah, so he was such a huge presence in our lives and in her life, and she'd seen him a number of times. And of course, I was asked, and I was like, as if I'm going to Neil Diamond, like I'm off to, the Strokes or whoever it was, someone a bit cooler. And I remember watching this with my husband, who'd never met my mother. And, my daughter was asleep, down the corridor. And I just remember thinking, oh my God, this is insane. And I never got to see, and I don't think Neil Diamond tours anymore. So the grief of not seeing Neil Diamond and maybe not going with my brothers to have that moment. And I just ended up, there was a bottle of wine involved as well. But I ended up absolutely bawling and just getting a bit like mad and going, you don't even know what you missed not meeting her, to my husband, that kind of way. And it all just kind of came up out of nowhere. And he was like, wow, okay, this happens. This the odd, crazy moment from time to time.
But you have them, and that's okay. I mean, it's part and parcel.
It's life. It's a lot. Being alive and being alive.
It's not linear. It comes out of anywhere, and any little thing.
exactly
can set it off.
Exactly.
You're just talking about your daughter there.
Yeah.
And she's 7.
She's 7.
Yeah.
She is 7.
So starting
That's
to...
a vibe.
Yeah.
Yes.
Starting to come in to being her own person.
Yeah.
Like an age where she has opinions and she knows what she likes.
Oh, yes.
And likes to do her own thing. So what does that must bring a lot back for you of your own mum, how you were with your own mum.
Yeah. I mean, there's all the mumisms now. I mean, I don't know if they're in the just like fluoride in the tap water, but you know, I'm like, if you fall off that monkey bars, don't come running to me.
Yeah.
And all the kind of stuff that I'm giving you one more chance, and all the sort of things that way my mother would talk to me, I'm now talking to her, which is just so odd, you know. And I'm like, is this just how mums talk to their kids, or is it just specific to us, you know? But my daughter is doing a lot of talking about Grandma Gabby.
Okay.
We have a Grandma Kay, so she can't be Grandma Gay, so she has to be Grandma Gabby. And, you know, we talk about her as if she's still alive, if that makes any sense. I mean, she knows that she's died. And then there was a couple of times, you know, where when I'm putting Izzy to bed, you know, she's like, why didn't I get to meet Grandma? And she cries, you know, and she's upset. And I'm like, I don't know if I can really handle this a lot. You know I have to have these conversations, but they come 5 nights in a row with the tears, you know, and where is she? And, well, if she's in the ground, what, you know, and all of this. And I'm like, I remember going down to my husband one night and going, you kind of need to come up now and help me with this, because I'm doing this alone and it's taking a bit out of me right now. But she speaks about her with lots of affection, and actually having a dead grandmother seems to be a bit of a bonus on the playground. She's like, I told everyone she's dead and they don't believe me. I'm like, well, do you want me to come in and corroborate your story for you?
I can show and tell.
A little bit, you know. I don't think she's 7, so she's not really understand. Lots of chat about death, and all of that.
Well,
but
it's a curious age as well,
massively,
because also, I guess now they're exposed to more stuff on whether she's online or not online.
No,
but just the sort of surrounding, like they hear, and people are more open about conversations, and
definitely,
you know, which I think is a good thing in one way, because it makes it more natural. I mean, but at the same time, sometimes they know a bit too much.
Well, I think I've oversold death a little bit now, because unfortunately, you know, Izzy got really upset about, you know, what it meant. I remember my mum telling me about death actually in the back of the car going to Donegal. You know, we wouldn't have gone past a graveyard or whatever, and I was like, what's that? You know, and she explained. And I remember the unfairness. I was like, oh, this sounds awful, you know. And then, of course, she came in with the transubstantiation business. I mean, hello, what a way to really mess up, you know. And this kind of, on the day of judgment, you'll be reunited with your body. And I was like, oh, I don't know if I like the sound of that either, you know. But with Izzy now, you know, am I going to go to heaven? When am I going to heaven? Are you going to be in heaven? Is everyone going to be in heaven? And I'm like, listen, it's great. Yeah. It's like Alton Towers. You can do what you want. You can eat what you want. I mean, I'm leaving out some very broad details here, obviously. Yeah. But I'm like, you can do what you want up there, and we'll all be there, and it'll be wonderful. And then she turned around and she goes, I can't wait to get to heaven now. And of course, part of me, you know, going, oh, don't even say it out loud. You know, this is horrific, you know. But I would love her for not to be afraid of it. It must
be the fact that she's knows who your mum is, and is curious, and she's part of her life.
It's a huge wound that she will never have met her. You know, and that my mum, but you know, I don't know. My mum was cool. I don't know if she wanted to necessarily be a grandmother. I mean, when I was 20 and having boyfriends, she was like, don't make me a grandmother. You know, she was very definite on that. And I was a bit like, you know, maybe she, you know, would she have been a boundary grandmother going, I'm not doing the babysitting? Or would she have been cool? Or would she have been a nightmare going, listen, I mean, not to a 7-year-old, but I mean, I got cigarettes and alcohol from my mum. Like, you know, would she have been like that with my daughter? And I would have been like, for God's sake, stop. You know, I just don't know. It's, you know, it'll never.
And that's part of the hard thing, is not knowing the relationship.
Absolutely.
I always think when you don't know what it might be like, or what would they get on, would they not get on, you know, their mannerisms, their parallels. Do you feel you try and emanate her a little bit, or do you go in being a mum, or do you find you sort of go further away as possible?
My mum had 3 kids and was a full-time nurse and was always just on the absolute verge of a nervous breakdown the whole time. She was like, God, I'm going to kill you guys. And I'm a bit like that. And I only have the one, that kind of way. And I just remember her feeling very overwhelmed, and very kind of short on patience, and I'm like that as well. I mean, me and my mum were extremely alike. So I find that I can be a bit like, triggered by, if something's not happening, or if I'm not being listened to, or if someone's not doing as they're told, I, go from 0 to 90 in record time, and my mum was a bit like that. Now, I don't know if it's learned behaviour, a genetic thing, is it a mum thing that everyone does secretly, but it's been sad to not be able to go to her, were you like this? Did you do that when I did this or whatever? The big wound, of course, is that you're not able to go, now I understand all that you did for me. And thank you. I could never say that because I'd never become a parent, but my God, you understand all the elbow grease that goes on behind the scenes that as a child you have absolutely no clue. I mean, my daughter walks around like Lady Gaga. And meanwhile, the Ents committee, the housekeeper, the money
personal assistant.
Oh, the personal assistant is the butler. I mean, I call myself the butler.
The personal shopper.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, she has it made, my kid. And she's no idea she's been born. She just thinks it all happens by magic.
Like in time,
well,
as we know.
And may I hope, may I still be around when she realises it, But I mean, I don't think I mean, with my own mum, I don't know if I realised all that she did for me as a parent. I think when we got to a certain age, teenage years were obviously brutal. And she was definitely harshing my mellow now a lot in the teenage years, even if she was, giving us vodka or whatever, but, it's, I never got to go, God, I get why you did what you did, why you said what you said, and why you swore me off that guy. Yeah. Or, I just thought she was, getting in the way of a good time.
Yeah. But I think deep down as a parent, they will, or you at least hope they'll get a bit of it. I mean, it does. There are times, will they ever understand?
I know.
But they sort of do.
I hope so. I really hope so.
From
your mouth to God's ear.
Your book and the publication of your book, that must have been sort of bittersweet, though, because it's a huge thing. It's amazing. Esther's now following you.
Thank you.
I read it in one sitting.
Oh,
now,
God.
I was on holidays, so but it's I was sort of thinking how for you that's such a personal achievement.
It was incredible. Yeah. I mean, it's one of those achievements, and I've written about this in my Irish Independent column as well, is you're almost flat. It's so amazing that when it happens, you're kind of flat about it. You're like, instead of, sitting around and going, this is it. This is the stuff that life is made of. It wasn't an euphoric moment. It was a bit like, I walked into Eason's and went, that's lovely, look at that. And then I was a bit like, well, I better get back to the second one now. And, I mean, I'm always a person, that when an achievement has happened, I never just sit back and bask in it. I go, right, that's that done. What's next? That's just how I am.
Next.
So I'm always about the next. On my book launch, my family were there, and some of my mother's family were there, and Edel Coffey did the speech. And she mentioned my mum, and she was like, look, she would have been so proud of you, and to know that is lovely, it would have been lovely for her to see it. But again, my mum didn't, shower me with praise either. She was a bit like, well, you've that done, and now what are you going to be doing? That kind of way. She never really let me get complacent about anything that I'd ever achieved, that kind of way. She was like, well, now you've gotten your degree, and the masters is what masters will we be doing?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
What's
none of
the
this.
Next thing?
Well done, you. I know. I never really got that, and my dad is a bit like that. Maybe it's a Donegal thing, but they're not people to clap you on the back and be like, good on you. They're like, are you looking for a parade office or what? Kind of a thing. So,
but the character in your book, Esther, and I don't want to give too much away for people who haven't read it, but it is quite. I actually thought it was really sad in parts. Like, it's really funny, and she's funny, and just sort of everybody knows an Esther.
Yeah.
To a degree, as a person.
Sure.
But it's how she changes in one way with her grief and the path that, to all intents and purposes, nobody would go down. Well, maybe when we were all younger, we might have gone down that path with somebody.
Yeah.
But it's just a path that you just sort of go, what?
I know.
When you're her age. And it's sad, and it just shows you what grief can do to you.
Absolutely. I mean, it's funny because so many people have read this book going, I thought it was going to be a fun, light-hearted romp, satire on
fun
celebrity.
And funny, but there's
but it does bring you. It's a bit like, do you remember that clip a few years ago, the Too Many Cooks clip that started off as a kind of a nice 80s sitcom and just turned into a mad, complete trip, and I think that was on purpose. I wanted people to be like, this is a fun thing, and then the next thing they're reading it from behind their fingers and they actually go, this is the most stressful thing I've actually read in a long time, and I suppose, it's probably worth saying what happens to Esther is she experiences a pregnancy loss and she falls into a bit of a depression and a bit of a grief, and in order to solve that, she develops a crush on an actor that she crosses, meets eyes with in London. And she just goes home the way we've always, we all do, Ted Levy, actor.
Little Google.
Ted Levy, IMDb. Ted Levy single.
Yeah.
And then from then on in, she is completely hooked. And he is also
and
bereaved.
The length she goes to.
Well, listen. She's a woman on a mission, and I admire her tenacity. I'll never be able to write a character like it again, and I'm trying. Trust me.
Yeah.
But she just is a girl with a one-track mind, and she stops at absolutely nothing to get her goal.
Oh, it's a movie.
Well, I hope again from your mouth to God's ear, but it's sort of amazing how grief, she does say at the end of the book, she's like, I just wanted a kind of holiday from myself. I needed to retreat from the awfulness of my reality, and I wanted to park my head in a nice, fun, rosy thing. And I remember, when my mum died, the crushes I were having now with people in real life were insane. Do you know what I mean? They were really so much more vivid. I was so much more thirsty, and I was horny. I've said this before. I think there's, a study to be done on grief and then this weird horniness that you feel, or a weird sort of I need to have sex, that kind of way. And someone told me that the parts of the brain that process both of these things are quite close to each other, so there may be that. But I do remember feeling, and I think it's to do with just needing to feel very, very alive. You feel incredibly alive when someone has died. I can't really describe this any better.
But it's also, it's an escapism. It's about escapism. It's why so many people, I think as well, they change the way what they wear. Oh, yeah. They change the way they look.
The hair colour. I changed my hair colour.
Yeah, they change their style, for example, or they take up running, or that's just something that they would never, and I'm speaking honestly here, have owned Lycra in their lives, and then suddenly doing this 10K,
I know, I'm a new person.
I'm a new person, and it's reinvention. Completely. I think, because you have to create a new life.
Yeah, well, you've been brought down from, you've been tossed to the ground effectively. Your scaffolding, if you, in the case of a partner, a parent, your northern star is gone. The scaffolding that is you has just been taken out from under you. So you are like a crumbling mess on the floor, and you need to build it up brick by brick. And of course, part of you notices that opportunity and goes, geez, I could refashion myself into somebody completely brilliant now. And that happens. But, again, and I think this is what happens with Esther, she's just like, this is exciting. And she's, like I say, she's on a mission. It's set in 2010 at a time when you could friend anyone on Facebook. You don't really get away with it too much anymore now, right? But at the time, people were just collecting friends like Billy-O, and she manages to get herself, I'm not going to do any spoilers, but she gets herself into Ted Levy's social circle with alarming efficiency and expediency.
It's very impressive.
I mean, listen, I look at her and I go,
she's
go girl.
She's a super stalker. Is there a bit of you in there? Is there, because, as a journalist, you have to find things out.
I can find people.
Yeah,
I can find people. I have found people. I haven't found famous. I'll put it this way, I've never blown up my marriage to run away to Canada to meet a famous actor. That hasn't happened yet. But I do remember that though from like the grief thing. My dating had completely changed. I wasn't sort of in control. I was able to kind of meet people and just be like, this is cool, this is fun, this is that. But I was like, I need to get going on settling down, and I need to meet my lobster, and and it just became a whole thing. And anyone that I kind of got attracted to, it was incredibly intense in a way that it had never really been before, you know. And I have a very, very vivid imagination, so these crushes, they were little bit like Esther's kind of imaginary relationship, you know. I was definitely retreating a lot into the fantasy of being with a certain guy or whatever, you know. But you know, I did know my place.
You can see but you can see that sort of, and it's not neediness. It's just this. I think if it's somebody as well that would be different from your normal type, it's like this, okay, well, if I do this, then my life is different.
Exactly. And you know, Esther's married to somebody already, you know, that kind of way, which I was not married to anybody when my mum died.
But she was bored with him as well.
She was sleepwalking a little bit, you know, and then she finds herself just invigorated by this whole mission. And yeah, there was definitely a new type and a new kind of... And I think a lot of readers will say to me, I related to this up to the point, and then it just went off on a whole other, you know, I related to the, you know, Googling somebody and having a little kind of fantasy daydream about them. I think a lot of people have done that. I'm not the only person in the world who have ever done that.
You're not.
But I think then, you know, when I say she gets on a plane, they're a bit like, holy Jesus, does she not understand like social norms around here? And then, of course, it goes from, I mean, her getting on the flight is the least of it, to be honest.
No, it is.
You know,
we don't want to ruin it.
I won't ruin it.
But I mean, you know, as well as the baby loss, there's other loss there. There's her dad and, you know, that seemed to have been shoved down and brushed under the carpet and not talked about. And that sort of comes to the fore. It does. And she doesn't have the emotional toolkit to process any of this because she was never taught to, and she'd experienced traumas in her past and a very maybe unstable, chaotic upbringing, you know, with her mother. And she was just left without the sort of emotional health to be able to do all this or to even ask for help. I mean, she is surrounded by people, and look, you know, miscarriage and pregnancy loss are incredibly isolating things. I don't know if you saw that BBC series Babies. Holy smokes, it's incredible. But it's a very, very isolating thing, and there could be somebody literally in the bed next to you who is going through a completely different experience and not able to reach you in yours. And I think I was trying to really get at that. And a lot of people are like, how come she'd no friends to talk to her? She just didn't reach out to them, and people she
don't
sort of pushed them away as well.
She pushed them away.
And I think that's the whole thing about grief as well, is what we were saying. It's not linear. It's different to everybody. Everybody's different. It comes out at different times. You know,
it really does. It really does. And I think that's really important, is there's no such thing as I'm done now. I think I'm okay. And, you know, there's that sort of Kubler-Ross, you know, the you know, stages of grief. And then you think, I've accepted it. I'm healed. Yay. You know, and you've gone through it all. Let me tell you, you're going to literally wake up one morning or go to bed one evening or be on a tram, and it'll hit you clean between the eyes. And you'll be really scared that you're being pulled back into an abyss of pain. And it is what it is. Work with it, go with it, honour those feelings. I mean, it's so trite to say, but it's like, this is part and parcel of being alive. I hate that this is the price of love thing, but it really is part of the deal. You know, if you're going to be around people and love people, then these awful feelings are part of the bargain. Sorry.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
Tanya, thank you so much for coming on this week. Thank you. Thank you for listening to this episode of The Grief Pod with Venetia Quick. You can listen on SoundCloud or wherever you get your podcasts. We also have an online community on Facebook, The Grief Pod, or on Instagram @GriefPod Series.